Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I'm the Diggly Doodah Dr. Papatoy Panther, Mr. Slippers, here to serve it up to your niche cast styles with the Wobbly Wildcard. We're going to talk Kiwis squads, Kiwi Ferns squads, and just that whole International Rugby League arena. Then we'll slide on over to the Wobbly Wildcard to get his Flying Kiwis from the weekend. And of course, we had the first game of the A-League for the Wellington Phoenix, so we'll touch on that with the wildcard. But before we do any of that, let's just check in with how's the weather, wildcard?
It stopped raining. What do you know? I understand that our weather was heading down your way and is now off towards Coromandel Way or something like that. I was listening on the radio, people talking about all these like bloody weather events that they're expecting, and I'm like, man, we had that yesterday. Bloody Feijoa trees were halfway across the driveway. What do you expect?
Crikey, Jack, that's flying Feijoa trees.
Not halfway across, I'm exaggerating, but I swear they got lower, so I don't know if that's just heavy winds, I assume. Yeah, bit of a bloody journey getting down there.
Mate, as long as the avocado trees are still intact.
Ooh,
sure
I better check
days.
that. I swear there's not as much fruit as there was last year, though. I'm not sure why, if that's maybe a seasonal thing, like it was too dry for too long at the start of spring, or I don't know, but it's also deceptive because you look up those things and it's like you can't see a single fruit, and then you climb further up and suddenly there's like 100 of them and you just can't see them for the leaves. These are the ins and outs of owning an avocado tree.
Camouflaged avocados.
I say owning. You don't own trees. Let's be honest. Trees, if anything, they own us because they provide us our oxygen. We are caretakers of the trees.
There you go. I think it was on our last Patreon podcast, we did talk about, briefly, birds and your experience of birds flying in front of your car.
Yeah, no, that happened afterwards, the car thing. It was the bird that was pecking at the window that I mentioned. And then after we had that conversation about birds doing weird things at the changing of the seasons, that week, I had like 3 or 4 birds that just like suicide missions flying right in front of the car as I'm driving along. Just no idea what's going on there, but I don't know, something in the air?
I definitely have, every time I'm driving these days, a bird flies in front of my car. Like it's just you're just driving, and then a bird just saw. I think they do it intentionally, just for a bit of fun. Like they just like,
yeah,
how close can I, how close can I go to this car? But what happened, wildcard, was yesterday. So I'd been watching these birds fly in front of my car a couple of days, and then yesterday, there's a dead bird on the road. It was like, well, obviously, if you swing that close to a car, there's a chance you might get hit, and I saw that, and then. One of his friends, another bird, was trying to fly in and check on him, and they almost got hit as well. So it was a bit of just an interesting afternoon with the old birds. I've definitely been in tune with the birds. Let me just say that.
That's a bit of a tragic story.
Mate,
those poor bloody birds.
Oh, mate, there's enough of them. Crikey, Jack. Let's get on to this Kiwis and Kiwi Ferns squad wildcard. The Kiwis coach Michael McCowatt named his squad, and players who have come in from the last squad, the mid-season test against Tonga. You've got Jermaine Sako, Corey Harawira Naira, Braden Hamlin Welly, Shans Nickel Clockstad, and that's it. Zane Tedavano was in that squad to play Tonga, but he was like 18th, 19th man along with Kieran Foran, and he's in the squad again. And then coming in, people who are out of that squad that played against Tonga, Easton Masters is unavailable, Dylan Watene-Zalesniak's unavailable, Jesse Bromwich is unavailable, and James Fisher-Harris is another notable absentee. So to me, that just shows the depth available to Aotearoa, that you can have four to five players out, and you bring in 4 to 5 players without too much of an impact on the squad. I do want to just make one point about Jermaine Sako before I check in with you, Wildcard, is that for that mid-season test against Tonga, we had Martin Tapau. He opted to move and take his representative future to Samoa, which is cool, fine, honkadori. But at the same time, Jermaine Sako played in that test for Samoa as well. So when Jermaine Isako was selected for Samoa, because of all the hype around players going to play for Samoa and Tonga, and because, Marty Tapau had just done it, it was portrayed as Jermaine Isako turning his back on the Kiwis to make himself available for Samoa. At the time, all the major news outlets, including NRL.com, they were reporting it as that way, that Jermaine Isako had chosen to pledge his representative football allegiance to Samoa. Yet here he is again for the Kiwis, and that's simply because mid-season test, Jermaine Isako was 4th, maybe 5th in the wing depth chart. So you had Dallin Waitane-Zelezniak, you had Jordan Rapana, Ken Mamalo's there, Sean Nickel-Clockstand can play winger, you got guys like Remus Smith coming through as well. There's no shortage of Kiwi eligible wingers. And Jermaine Isako mid-season wasn't among the best 2. So he wasn't selected for that squad. And then he decided to represent Samoa. There was a family connection. His dad had cancer. And so it was a bit of honouring his father and the Samoan heritage and all of that. But it's just Isako's now been selected in this squad. So I just want to make it clear. I believe Isako's just full alignment with the Kiwis, but he wasn't selected in the last squad, so he decided to represent Samoa. Now he's back in this squad. Wildcard, do you have any other thoughts or ideas on maybe some of the new faces, some of the people who have been selected, or any questions or queries?
Yeah, well, just looking at the squad, it seems it's a pretty strong, like almost surprisingly strong squad for an end of year, bit of international rugby league that does in something that is not a World Cup year. It seems like it's a pretty strong squad. It's like you went through the changes from the mid-season team. Not a lot, only 4 guys dropping in or out. It's relatively strong, and that includes guys from the Melbourne Storm, guys from Sydney Roosters, guys from Canberra Raiders, who are all playing deep in the playoffs as well. So it seems like it's not quite top strength. It's never top strength outside of a major tournament for and even then for a international rugby league game. But it's pretty strong, and I'm impressed by some of the names who've been able to, guys who aren't injured, guys who aren't, and then you got one of our favourite players, Chance Nickel-Clockstand, getting in there for the Kiwis probably. Actually, that's not a bad place to start, because Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is also in here, so Chan's presumably, on the wing and centres somewhere other than fullback, or is he actually running? He won't be starting over Roger, will he?
No, and Issa Masters isn't selected, so there's only one specialist centre in Joey Manu,
right.
Which then leads me to believe that Chance Nickel-Clockstand will play at centre. Just talking about the centres wildcard again, just a quick little interjection. Esan Masters played, up until recently, he played for the West Tigers, and Michael Maguire is the coach of the West Tigers, and there was a bit of a rumour hound report about a month or 2 ago about Esan Masters being unhappy at the Tigers, not getting much ball. He switched from right centre to left centre, wasn't quite playing the same level. His coach of the Tigers is Michael Maguire. And now Esan Masters has made a move to the Cowboys official, and he's not in this Kiwi squad. So you could view it as there's a bit of a beef between Esan Masters and Michael Maguire. I just think it's more... there was a better opportunity that the Cowboys took that opportunity, and he's unavailable due to injury. So don't look too far deep into the absence of Esan Masters. But yeah, I think that will present an opportunity for Chance Nickel-Clockstand to play centre. You could look at someone like Britton Nakora could do a job there. Kenny Bromwich could do a job there. But those players are do-a-job centres. They're not quite international calibre centres. Chance Nickel-Clockstand is extremely versatile, played a lot of his junior footy at centre for the Melbourne Storm under 20s. So, yeah, that could be an option for him.
And then I guess the other major talking point is the halves pairing. It always is for a Kiwi squad. No Cody Nikorima, which is probably not surprising. I mean, they're only playing, it's 3 tests, say, against combo of Aussie and Great Britain, so you don't really need 4 halves, especially when you got a couple like sort of utilities who could, as you say, with the centres, guys who could do a little job if necessary. So Nicarima probably the fourth of 4 options there. No surprises he's not there, but it's like we were talking about when they played Tonga, and you got Benji Marshall, Kieran Foran, Sean Johnson all in the mix. First of all, what's your starting pair from those three? And second of all, I mean, we're just continuing on that sort of that cool buzz of the halves that we thought were going to be the long-term options. If you look back at like what 2012, 2013 sort of era, like guys who we figured would be running the show for the next 5 to 10 years. Benji a little bit older, so maybe not quite as long for him, but like he was out of the squad for a while. Sean Johnson's form's been a bit up and down since he moved to the Sharks. Even before he moved to the Sharks, he's had the odd injury as well. Kieran Foran obviously has had a bit of a wild career himself. I noticed his dad's coming back to New Zealand as well to run Air New Zealand, which I don't have any thoughts on, but just throw that one out there. So those 2 options, carrying on with the old legacy of getting the 3 sort of recent playmaking legends of Kiwi NRL in the mix there again, and also like who actually starts out of the trio.
I think the best Kiwis team would just start with Sean Johnson and Benji Marshall. I think you could change that and bring in Kieran Foran for Benji Marshall. I think Sean Johnson is going to be selected every time. Like, that's fine. That's on Kadori. I think he actually might be a better international player than an NRL player, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I think it's a good
But
point.
I think it's just so that's an important note, is just to savor these moments where we have Sean Johnson, Kieran Foran and Benji Marshall all together in the halves, because for whatever reason we haven't really had that, despite them all being established NRL players well deep into their NRL careers, into their professional careers, and now we're just getting this kind of serendipitous period where we have 3 of the best playmakers that New Zealand's ever produced all in the same Kiwi squad. It should have happened fucking long ago, and it should have never wavered from that point, but you can't control these things, so it's just cool to have. And then Jerome Hughes would be the next string, but Jerome Hughes is against Tonga. He came off the bench to play dummy half, and I think that's what he'll do again. You mentioned Cody Nicarima, their wild card, and like I was kind of surprised that you actually that you brought him up. Like, Cody Nicarima is a certified international, because at the moment he is not. And the halves pairing against Tonga was Sean Johnson and Benji Marshall. So we haven't seen, I think the end of year tour last year was Sean Johnson and Cody Nicarima, which was cool. And then Cody Nicarima came to the Warriors this year, and his rugby league footy, I'm just going to put this out there. I've been thinking about this a long time, wildcard, and I just believe the Warriors are cursed. There's just the Warriors are just cursed in every way. That's the only way you can explain this, which is what makes Warriors fandom so interesting, is because you're dealing with a cursed team and a cursed organization. So that's just how it is. So Cody Nicarima fell into that curse, and his career has basically stalled. Like, he hasn't got any better since joining the Warriors, to the point, wildcard, where Benji Marshall, Sean Johnson, Kieran Foran, Jerome Hughes, Dylan Brown are all better than Cody Nicarima. Maybe. So Cody Nicarima is suddenly 5th. Maybe him and Dylan Brown are kind of, even Stevens. So Cody Nicarima is at least the 5th best half available. And that's fair. That's not being harsh on Cody Nicarima. His form, his performances have produced that. So it's up to Cody Nicarima what he wants to do, because there's no shortage of available halves, and that's only increasing as more and more players from Aotearoa find their way to NRL clubs.
They should embarrassingly admit that the reason I brought his name up is because his name was brought up in the third paragraph. So right near the top, remember old journalism school where they have the inverted triangle. You start with the most important info and work your way downwards. Um, his name was in the third paragraph of the New Zealand Herald write up, which I just scribbled out, which I just had to breeze through right now to recap my brain. Which obviously, in hindsight, um, probably a little bit silly. But you also answered the follow up question I was going to offer, which was because we're talking about three slightly older halves, like who might be pushing through. Getting prepped to take over in the long run for these guys, or at least push them for depth and, give the Kiwis some stability moving forwards and all this kind of thing. And as much as you can never have stability in International Rugby League, which, to be honest, isn't really a big deal because there's always so many more players coming through the pipeline. You don't really need to have massive stability, but it helps to have, I guess, a core of leaders to bring the group together every time. So they seem to have a few of those in this time. Interesting idea about the curse of the Warriors, because you said that and you reminded me of some famous other sports curses. I'm thinking of the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs, most of all in Major League Baseball, and I just had a quick breeze. And how long the Warriors been around? 25, 26 years? Was maybe not quite that much. Was it 95 or 96? So about 25 years. The good news for Warriors fans then is that the curse of the Bambino for which one was that? That was the Red Sox when they sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees. Only took them 86 years to win a Major League Baseball title after that, and the Chicago Cubs were a much more breezy one. The curse of the Billy Goat, I think they call it. They only took 71 years to win a title in between. So, not too much longer to wait for Warriors fans. You've also just reminded me of something else, talking about guys who aren't quite on the international radar anymore. But news this week that Isaac Luke, I'm just going to take this opportunity to get a little bit selfish about this, but Isaac Luke might be offered a lifeline by the Dragons. What's the deal with that one? Because my first thought when I saw that is, well, the Dragons have an 80-minute hooker, and Cam McInnes. So what exactly is the plan there? I'm not sure, but they did try to mix it up a little bit towards the end of the season where they had a dummy half, quite a strong dummy half in Robson, coming off the bench to play like middle forward and that sort of like a long McInnes in the same way that the Melbourne Storm sort of do sometimes with Brandon Smith, but he was just not, there wasn't a great option for Mr. Robson. I could sort of see that as a plan for Isaac Luke, but I'm a little bit surprised. Like, you don't really look to injury-prone, older, experienced guys to be your energy off the bench necessarily. But I mean, Isaac Luke certainly has that ability in his game. So I don't know. First of all, is that actually happening? And second of all, like, is that something you can see a vision for?
As the chief rugby league reporter at the Niche Cache, and to be honest, like one of the best rugby league reporters in Aotearoa, I have no interest in the player transfer market. So, I don't really have thoughts on it other than you would be signing, like if you got a hooker, you've just let your young hooker go to the Cowboys and Reece Robson, and you're signing Isaac Luke. You're bringing Isaac Luke in as backup, but I'm still extremely confused as to how underestimated and under-celebrated Isaac Luke is and what he can offer a footy team. So, not sure what the deal would be there, but I think Isaac Luke's just going to take whatever offer comes to him from alternative NRL clubs. You mentioned, just to swing it back to the young halves, if you don't mind, Wildcard.
Go for it.
At the Warriors, you got Chanel Harris-Tavita. He goes all right. Dylan Brown's come through with the Parramatta Eels. The Warriors also have Paul Turner, who was in the junior Kiwis squad. They got a young half, Sione Moala, who was at halfback for the junior Kiwis. So both of those players are with the Warriors. So there's young halves coming through at the Warriors to put pressure on Cody Nikorima, let alone in the Kiwi NRL and the broader Kiwi NRL landscape. So it'll be interesting to see how, I don't even really think Cody Nikorima's a half. I think he's a fantastic kind of bench utility, is what I would say for Cody Nikorima, but we just got to wait and see what happens there. And we also have to wait and see what happens with Nelson Asafa-Solomona. Found himself in a bit of drama where all the Australians like to go somewhere in Asia. And yeah, so he's in a bit of a position. So we'll just wait and see what happens with him. Any other thoughts on that Kiwi squad? Any other questions, queries?
Yeah, just one last question. Is there's also this what is it, Nines World Cup or something coming up? Like, and seems there's a whole bunch of players sort of crossing over between these two squads. Like, what's the deal with that thing? Because I did not know a single thing about it.
The Nines World Cup's just got international teams playing Nines Rugby League. There's like Danny Levi's playing for Samoa. You've got all sorts of players eligible for Australia and New Zealand playing for Samoa, Tonga. Celestino Ravatamata just played for the Junior Kiwis. He's going to play for Fiji in the Nines. And another weird one, I saw that Shah Bel Tasapali, who played for the Junior Kiwis, he's been named in Lebanon's Nines squad. So it'll be cool. It'll be like it's just a bit of T20 to get people interested in rugby league and have a bit of fun, but there's not going to be any like serious judgments made from it, so I'm not too fussed about the Nines. I do, again, just one extra thing, wildcard. Big shout out to Braden Hamlin-Uele from the Cronulla Sharks. Nickel Clockstad is thoroughly deserving, probably the most deserving of his Kiwis call-up. Braden Hamlin-Uele isn't too far behind. He came off the bench for the Sharks every game, averaging 10 metres per run. He was a wrecking ball, try-scoring machine, and I'm thinking of Kiwis teams in the future. You're going to have Braden Hamlin-Uele, you're going to have Asafa Solomona, you're going to have James Fisher-Harris, you're going to have Joseph Tapine. That's kind of that caliber of young Kiwi forward is so astronomical. It is extremely exciting, and I'm just stoked for Hamlin-Uele to get that call up. He deserves it. If you haven't really been watching NRL footy too closely or watching the Cronulla Sharks too closely, Braden Hamlin-Uele is immensely deserving of his call up.
Beautiful. I can't remember if I said it or not, but just to clarify, I would absolutely adore having Isaac Luke at the Dragons if that does indeed happen. He is one of my favourite players, and I am fully on board with you. I do not understand how he cops it a lot from Fanzay sometimes, and I just don't, other than the fact that he got swept into the Warriors curse, that's about all I can think of for why that would possibly be the case. I mean, he was getting ragged on for, I think it was the season before last when they lost like 8 games in a row or something towards the end, and to me, Isaac Luke was their best player through that stretch, and yet I was hearing from people about how rubbish he was, and I just don't understand it. Anyway, chuck us some words on the Kiwi Ferns squad as well, because they've got games coming up too, don't they?
Sorry, I just keep getting all these weird ideas coming delayed. You mentioned the Warriors curse. I think there's a major difference between the Warriors curse and a lot of the other famous curses. Those famous curses are like things happen to stop that team winning. The Warriors curse is far more all-encompassing. Like, when you arrive at the Warriors, you turn to shit. It's not necessarily like the Warriors... Yeah, there's some elements of it because they've made 2 grand finals and they haven't won anything, but even 2 grand finals isn't really enough to put them in that category, and it's not like anything cursed their grand final hopes. I just think the whole club and everything about it is just cursed because it makes zero sense. All their dramas, all their issues, zero sense. I think Alex Corvo, the man who we all thought was going to whip the Warriors into shape, he's left after like 2 seasons. So he felt the Warriors curse because he was big man trainer guy, and the Warriors looked about as... I would say that the Warriors in 2019 were about as... were the least energized I've ever seen. So whatever Alex Corvo was doing was completely wrong because he fell into the Warriors curse, and the proof was in the pudding on the field, and the Warriors were shit on the field. So, yeah, all aspects of the Warriors are cursed. The Kiwi Ferns squad, there's a couple of changes there with the likes of Atawhai Tupaia. She's coming in, and then you've got Billie Jean Ale, who played for Whetu Samoa against the Kiwi Ferns. She's in the squad as well. And you also have Jules Newman. Ale and Jules Newman, they would make their Kiwi Ferns debut. Jules Newman's a winger. Billie Jean Ale's a forward, a robust forward. And her partner is actually Ngā Tokotoru Arakua, who is absent in this Kiwi Ferns squad. Which is a bit of a bummer, because you look at the group of players who left the Broncos from last season to join the Dragons this season. Tuela Fotumawala, who is in this Kiwi Ferns squad, but she got suspended in game 1 of the women's NRL competition and missed the whole competition, so she felt a bit of that curse herself. And now other players who made that move, Maitua Whetarika, Ngā Tokotoru Arakua, and Kimiora Ngati, they are all absent in this Kiwi Ferns squad as well. So it didn't quite work out so good for them. The Broncos went on to win their second NRL Women's Premiership, which is a great effort considering their turnover of players. And the Kiwi Wahine who are in that Broncos squad this year feature Lavinia Gould and Amber Paris Hall, who are in the Kiwi Ferns squad, along with half Racy McGregor. Lavinia Gould's pretty interesting. She was playing sevens rugby for New Zealand, and then she had a bit of a performance-enhancing kind of drug situation that scratched her out for a couple of years. Then she moved to Brisbane, where she was playing rugby for the Queensland Reds women's team in Super Rugby Women's. And to the best of my knowledge, Wildcard, Lavinia Gould has been playing Women's Super Rugby and NRL Women's at the same time. So early in the year, she plays Women's Super Rugby, then NRL Women's comes around and she plays NRL Women's. She's won back-to-back premierships with the Brisbane Broncos. She's kind of amazing, but it's hard to see her getting a start in this Kiwi Ferns team because you've got two other hookers in Crystal Rota and Nita Maynard, who will probably take those spots, and then Lavinia Gould may miss out. So just an interesting note there. Hani Hirami is back after unfortunate family circumstances ruled her out of the whole NRL Women's, so I'm sure she is fizzing to get some footy under her belt. And yeah, that's about it in terms of interesting notes. They faced the Jillaroos. Unfortunately, a young lady by the name of Batil Vete Welsh, who is from Taipa in Northland Wildcard, she moved to Australia when she was like 12 or 14-ish, and she was the fullback for the Dragons women's team, one of the best players, probably the best fullback in the whole competition. She has opted to make herself available to the Jillaroos and won't play for the Kiwi Ferns. So that's a bit of a bummer. But other than that, fairly strong Kiwi Ferns team. And one other weird note, Wildcard, which I've talked a lot about in wrapping up the NRL Women's competition. Angelina Leotawa was named outside the top 17. So she was named on an extended bench for every single Warriors game. All 3 games the Warriors played in NRL Women's this year, Leotawa was named on the extended bench. In all 3 games she played, and in all 3 games she was one of the Warriors' best players. So that makes no sense at all. Like, you're selecting your best player on the extended bench. She's a very robust, dynamic forward, plays edge, can play middle. Just, wow, she's amazing. The coaches of the Warriors are also the coaches of the Kiwi Ferns, Justin Morgan and Louisa Avayaki. So they selected Angelina Leotawa on the extended bench for every single game of the NRL Women's competition. She played in every single game. She was the best player in most of those games, if not second best, if not third best. And now those same people have selected her in the Kiwi Ferns squad. It's just very confusing. But she's there. She played all those games. She was one of the Warriors' best players. And now she's here repping the Kiwi Ferns.
Beautiful stuff. Is there anything else to say on the International Rugby League front, or shall we switch on to a little bit of Welly Nicks?
One more thing. Lavinia Gould, she played sevens rugby for New Zealand, and then Bailey Simonson, who is in the New Zealand Nines squad, he has played sevens rugby for the New Zealand Sevens men's team as well. So you've got two former sevens rugby union players who are now either in the Kiwi Ferns squad or the New Zealand Sevens team. Bailey Simonson, his father was an All Black, but he was born and raised in Sydney, and then he came back to New Zealand to try play sevens rugby, played Bay of Plenty Rugby Union ITM Cup as well, cracked that, and then he came back to Canberra, where I think his dad works for the government or something like that, caught up a train and trial deal with the Raiders, rest is history. So yes, we will slide into football wildcard, but I just want to get your Flying Kiwis picks for this week. I saw old mate CJ Bott had a nice little moment that you shared on our Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a little bit of a link between Sevens and Flying Kiwis as well, because the New Zealand men's seven team were in Germany for the Oktoberfest Sevens, which is like a pre-season tournament before the next World Series starts. And they did some like promo stuff with Sarpreet Singh and Ali Riley at Bayern Munich while they were there. And so there was a little video I chucked up this morning on them. Like they just had like a little penalty shootout thing, sometimes with a rugby ball and sometimes with a football. And yeah, those sevens guys, it was a little bit stacked against them because there's not a whole lot of kicking in rugby sevens, and they certainly struggled to kick that ball and keep it under the crossbar. Which I suppose, playing rugby, that's always the joke at football training when you're a kid, is when someone hoosts one over the bar, someone yells out, drop goal, 3 points. So yeah, a little bit of a swing there. CJ Bott though, brilliant from her. Vizio were playing against, let me whip up my notes here. They were playing against one of these teams, Kristianstad. A team in a pretty similar situation to them. I've talked before about how Vizio is sort of on the fringes of this Champions League race. They were sitting second about a month ago, but they lost a couple games. They lost games to teams around them as well. So it was sort of like this culmination of the season where they've done really well and beaten the teams they should and getting themselves in an amazing position, but they actually hadn't played a lot of the top teams. And next week they got to play Rosenborg, who Ellie Riley's old team, and they haven't quite won the championship yet. They need one more point, but they're going to come out fizzing, looking to wrap up that title. So Vizio are going to have to probably beat them. But even just to be in position to have the opportunity to try beat them, they needed to beat Kristianstad, and it was 0-0 with about a dozen minutes left. They got a free kick. Everyone's gone forward except like the keeper and maybe like one defender or something. One of their playmakers whips it deep into the box. It's a little too deep. The keeper comes out and grabs it, but then the keeper spills it. CJ Bott pounces. She does a little, gets her foot to the ball to take it away from a defender. Takes a touch to the side on the turn to try escape into just a little bit of space, just enough to be able to unleash a shot into what was more or less an open net with the keeper sort of sprawled on the ground there. Did exactly what needed to be done, was the hero in the moment. They needed a hero. They went on and scored a second goal as well afterwards to win that one 2-0, which I think keeps them... They doesn't get them back up to second, which is the second Champions League spot, but it gets them 2 points off top. 2 points off second, so first place is about 11 points or something ahead of them. So there's 7 points ahead of them. So there's not any catch. No, 8. Bloody hell. I just should be looking at the table while I'm doing this. But yeah, so they're not going to come first, obviously. That's no dramas. But if they can beat the team that is going to win it and then hope for some bad results come back the other way from, I think it's Gothenburg, who beat them recently, I think 2 weeks ago they beat Vizio, and also Gothenburg were beaten by Ali Riley's Bayern Munich in the round of 32 in the Champions League at around a similar time to they played. Like they played against Ali Riley in the midweek and then played against CJ Bott in the weekend. So Funny how those things sort of work out. So yeah, Vizio keeping themselves in the mix. They probably won't get second, but they could. If they can spring an upset next week, then there's certainly still a possibility. So when they needed a hero to stay in the mix, they found one from their resident football fern. I normally chuck a second one out here as well, so I'll throw one towards. It was an international break for all the fellas, so no one really doing anything there. I'll throw one towards Hannah Wilkinson, because playing for Sporting in Portugal, they're Sporting one of the... Actually, Hannah Wilkinson used to play for Vizio, and they had a season crossing over where she was teammates with CJ Bott at that same club. She once also scored the goal in the last couple years ago, I think, scored the goal in the final day of the season, which won them. It might have been the second to last game of the season, but it won them a crucial 3 points, which secured them avoiding relegation for that year. Which, obviously, considering where they are now, pretty important moment in the history of that club. So she's playing for Sporting, who are far and away. There's sort of 2, maybe 3 teams in Portugal that is far better than everyone else, which is relatively common in European women's football, where you get a lot of, like, if the big clubs want to throw their money at their women's teams, they can. And like Barcelona and Atletico Madrid are way better than everyone else in Spain, and Bayern Munich and a couple others. Although Bayern Munich lost this week, so they're not as far ahead. Wolfsburg are the team that's further ahead. PSG and of course Lyon in France, it's a similar thing. Juventus in Italy, like the big teams, if they spend the money, they tend to win a lot of games. Sporting are one of the bigger teams in Portugal. Their previous game was about 3 weeks ago. It's an international break, and then for some reason they also had a bye in between there. They won 17-0 against the bottom team. Hannah Wilkinson came off the bench, and I think she only scored once in that game. So playing against the second bottom team in the following game, Wilkinson started. She scored 3 goals, got the hat-trick, completed that hat-trick right at the end with probably the best of the 3 goals, of the sneaky little run in behind the defence, good header to beat the keeper as the keeper rushed out. So Wilkie getting the hattie there, and on top of that, she also set up, I think, the first and the third goals. So they won 6-1 in the end. She scored 3 goals and set up 2 others. So pretty good day at the office there. And Sporting, who have a plus 23 goal difference after 3 games, next week play against Benfica, who are the top team in Portugal, who have a plus 38 goal difference after 3 games. So you imagine, like, their average win is by like 13 goals. I think they beat that team that Sporting won 17-0 against them. They beat them like 24-0 or something like that. So it's only the 4th game of the season in that one next week against Benfica. It is away as well for Sporting. Only the 4th game of the season, but considering those 2 teams look to be just like head and shoulders above everyone else, they're the only 2 teams that have perfect records through the first 3 games. Considering that, probably pretty significant title ramifications even this early on in the season on that game. So one to keep an eye out. Wilkie probably wanting to keep up that goal scoring form in a game like that as well.
Lovely jubbly wildcard. Not quite as scandalous as the Wellington Phoenix. I just want to roll through some stats here, wildcard, and then I'm sure you could blabber on about the Wellington Phoenix till your
but I better not.
Heart's content. So I'll just fire some direct questions at you, but these stats kind of tell you all you need to know. 54% possession, so they were dominant with the footy. 8 corners to their opponent's 2 corners. Almost 100 more passes. 30 crosses to 7 crosses, wildcard.
What do the shot numbers look like? Because they only had 1 shot on target, eh? I think they had more
1
shots,
shot on
but only
target
one on
to
target.
6 shots on target, but 14 shots overall to 16 shots. So for me, wildcard, just as a very much a casual football fan, these are the type of performances where I just hate football. Like how just one team can just do that and just make it such a boring 90 minutes, and that was where the Wellington Phoenix are at now. That's my feeling. So now I'm going to direct some questions at you, Wildcard, and see what you can come up with. The first thing I want to know is who was your favourite in that game. Who was the new signing who gave you a little bit of a tingle, a bit of a buzz, a bit of a, this guy isn't helping the Wellington Phoenix score goals in this game because they didn't, but is someone who, can help the Phoenix. I can see a strong progression here. So I want a new signing who tickles your toes from that performance.
Yeah, don't have to think at all about this one because it's Callum McCowatt who... I mean, Callum McCowatt is just one of my favorite players to watch. I'm such a big fan of the way that guy plays, the attitude he plays with. He's always, always looking to be enthusiastic, looking to take on defenders or work a extra pass or get a shot away if it's the right. Like, his decision making is great, his energy is fantastic. I think one of the notable things it's easy to sleep on from that game is because obviously he was the Knicks' most creative player, especially when he was able to link up with Cacace pushing forward, and that combination on the left there, Libby Cacace and Callum McCowatt, is something we saw a lot of at the Under-20 World Cup to great effect, and I think the Phoenix are going to get a lot of benefits out of that throughout this season, but also just the fact that not only was Cacace getting forward and helping out McCowatt in attack, but McCowatt was getting back and helping out Cacace in defense too, which is pretty important. So that left side was quite exciting. We already know about Libby Cacace. He's not a new signing. Callum McCowatt is just everyone knows the story. He's a Ole Academy guy. He's scored the winner for Auckland City in the Premiership final 2 years ago, scored 2 goals and, had the shot that led to the own goal for the third goal in their win against Team Wellington for Eastern Suburbs in the last Premiership. So he's dominated in big games throughout his career so far, even though he's only 20 years old. He's been a part of... he was a big part of that Under-20 World Cup. Probably, to be fair, I don't think he quite hit the heights there that were hoped necessarily of him. He just didn't quite score the goals, but it's not to say he didn't play well. He was a important functioning member of that group. He's going to do the same for the Phoenix, and he just brings a little bit of energy. He wasn't starting a lot of games where throughout the preseason it sort of looked like, trying to read the tea leaves from some of those lineups, it sort of looked like he might be maybe an impact sub at this point, but he kept coming off the bench and scoring goals, so he was elevated to start this game and then was the best player for the Phoenix. So I think hopefully we're going to see a long run of a lot of Callum McCowatt, and yeah, certainly one to give you the tingles. Just need someone to bloody put some goals away alongside him, because it was just a bit too much of a one-man show for the Knicks, I think, in that first game.
But the combination of McCowatt and Cacace could be a combination that develops impressively. And because I think about the world of football, and it's a sport where there's just so much ins and outs and players coming and going, and I think the chemistry factor is severely underestimated. So if you can have similar players playing in the same position who know each other well, especially a left back who likes to burst forward, overlap, and then your midfielder can cover your defense if they're on the same alignment and they're thinking along the same thought pattern. It's so beneficial just to have that chemistry factor that McCowatt and Cacace may have and will definitely develop throughout the season.
Well, I think that's an enormously important point looking at the rest of the team as well, because there was 7 debutants and 7 players making their club debut in the A-League for the Phoenix, and I think 5 of them were making their A-League debuts full stop. So obviously a couple imports in there. You also had McCowatt, Marinovic, Kiwi players who hadn't played A-League before. So it wasn't there's just a lot of players from a lot of different areas, and the fact that Cacace and McCowatt have played a lot of age group stuff together and are familiar is pretty important. And it was so notable that combination, which I don't think we'll see it long term at the Phoenix. I think both of those two are destined for bigger spotlights throughout their careers, but certainly I think that's going to be something that we see a lot under. For the All Whites moving forward, and hopefully for the under-23s at the Olympics next year as well. Just chuck that one out there, because both these two should be in that squad. It's an under-23 squad. You're allowed to pick 3, I think, overage players, but those two are certainly pushing for starting spots in that team. I'd say Libby Cacace is an absolute lock for a starting spot. McCowatt maybe not quite, if only because there are a lot of other attacking players who will ask for consideration in those. But yeah, just looking at some of the other guys, just guys who have come from, like David Ball coming from England, Soterio coming from, I think was it Western Sydney Wanderers we signed him from, I think. You got Matty Steinman coming from Germany, who I thought had a really impressive game actually in the midfield. Steinman, I think he looks a really tidy player, and a guy who's not afraid to get his hands dirty as well, in a similar way to Alex Rufus. So I think that combination as well, it looks like one that will blossom nicely. But and Ulysses De Villa, who I thought had a bit of a shocker in his first game, which isn't to say he's a bad signer or a bad player. He looks like a fantastic player through preseason. It's just that this proper football, maybe like the A-League, we know is notoriously physical, and you're not going to get a lot of fouls necessarily, and he just looked like a guy who likes to entice a defender in, and we saw it to the best of it later in the second half when he nutmegged a couple guys in a row at one point, but he also, most of that game, just looked off the pace in a way where he just hasn't adjusted to the A-League yet. So he'll get there. I thought more disappointing was the fact he wasn't doing what McCowatt was doing in defence and getting back and looking energetic and just being a body, and he was getting dribbled past and he was walking back or jogging back. It wasn't the same, but it was just a tough day at the office for him. So I think he will that's the thing. A lot of these guys, we need them to adjust quickly because the Phoenix have a lot of new players, a new coach, new system. Like, there's no continuity from last season. That's tricky and it's hard. That's why I think my main overarching feeling from that first game was just that disappointing result, especially to lose to Mark Ruden's Western United, because obviously there's a little bit of a rivalry there, but just overall, they're a work in progress, and it just was so obvious from that first game where there were lots of positives, but there were also a lot of things where it's like they're just not ready and they were never going to be ready. It was impossible for them to be ready so quickly. It's just going to take a month or two for guys to even just get used to playing with each other and to build the same kind of combinations that Cacace and McCowatt have down the left already.
How did you view the strikers playing together? Are they?
They didn't. They barely played together at all.
Was it like one striker playing off the other? Are they just drifting apart from each other, no connection? Was it a classic kind of 4-4-2 with the two strikers side by side up front together? Because they're both new, David Bell and Joshua Sotorio. So what was your impression of those strikers, but less about them personally and more about how they were used in that game and how that might look moving forward?
Yeah, it's 4-4-2, but it's sort of like 4-2-2-2, which is how I like to. Well, it's how most people refer to it. I think it's how Ufuk Talai refers to the formation himself. You sort of got like they're wingers, but they're sort of inverted wingers. Like I actually thought there would be more room for them to be more fluid and drift inside, and they can if anytime they want to, but you got two number 10 players there, one on the left and one on the right, and I think a lot of the time with the attack, just like one of the things about having a good combination is that you just save time. Like, you've got that splits. It's the same with having a good first touch, is you just have that tiny bit more time to make decisions because you've got the ball exactly where you need it to be. And if you've got combinations where you can almost telepathically tell what the other guy is going to do, then you save time of having to look up or having to wait for them, or everything's just click, and it works in that way. And if you don't have that, you look slow and you look a little bit laborious and you look a little bit sleepy sometimes. And I think Ball and Soterio each worked hard enough, each showed little glimpses of their own. It's just we didn't see a lot of interplay. It sort of looked like either the Phoenix worked the ball up the left-hand side or they tried to work the ball up the right-hand side, and there was a left striker or a right striker dependent. And he didn't just it almost needed someone to do what Sarpreet Singh used to do, or Max Burgess as well last season, where you just have that central playmaker sort of linking things around together, because it just looked like a bit of a sort of like a, what do they, how they say the arrowhead formation when you're defending in rugby in the line, sort of how you shape up like that. It was sort of like that, like a winger up and diagonally inwards to a striker, across to a striker, back and diagonally backwards to a winger. It was just a little too, and that's what you do when you don't quite understand what everyone else is doing, yet you fall back on the system and the formation. So I don't think that's necessarily like Well, I'll say the Phoenix have a lot of room for improvement in these areas, so I don't think that the impressions from that first game necessarily have to be something we stick with. But yeah, they look like a team with a lot of players who just didn't quite know what each other was doing yet, and that's the only way they could be. There's too many players from too many different areas. There was a lot of rebuild in the squad last season. Mark Rudin famously only had like 6 or 7 players at his at his first training session there. But like he also had guys like he had Durante at the back who'd been at the club for ages, and he had Roy Krishna at the front who could be a focal point. So it wasn't as disjointed. You could always like rely upon that one leader, that one sort of like that one guy just to dictate the play and bring everyone else in line in a way they don't have with 2 new strikers and 2 new attacking playmakers behind them, and one of their midfielders is completely new as well. The back line is the most stable of them because obviously Cacace was there last season, Taylor was there last season, Luke De Vere is an A-League veteran. Louis Fenton's been at the club longer than anyone at this point. Stefan Marinovic has played with Fenton, and I don't know if he's overlapped with Cacace yet, but he will in the for the All Whites at some point. And he's a Kiwi guy who knows enough about the club, and he's a good goalkeeper. And the goalkeeper needs to, goalkeeper doesn't have to merge in with everyone else. They're sort of their own lone sort of fellow there at the back with the gloves on, and I thought he had quite a good game actually, Marinovic, but it was doing things I expect him to be able to do, which is save shots. He's a shot stopper. He's brilliant at that. It's the other aspects of his goalkeeping which weren't really tested in this game that have been the things that got him question marks in his time in Vancouver, where I thought for the most part he was very good for Vancouver. They cut him less because he was bad or anything, more just because they wanted to use that import spot further up the field because their team sucked. And it wasn't any use having a great goalkeeper when your defense has given up so many shots a game. So I thought he was good. I thought the defense was nice and solid. I am worried if there's an injury at centre back because I don't think there's much depth there. I also thought Tim Payne came on and had a great little impact as well. So there's a lot to like. Like the goal they conceded was a little bit sloppy. It came from a cross down that right hand side where Fenton and De Vere were just struggling to keep up. Payne actually, when he came on, even though he's not a natural right back, he is a natural I don't even because I don't want to use the word battler here because he's not a battler, but he has some of those battlerish qualities where you're like he's just gonna do exactly what he's asked and he's gonna plug a gap if that's the case. And I thought he did that really well. He had a great little cameo coming off the bench, and if he's a little like defensive / midfield utility, I think that's turning into a pretty quality signing there as well. So lots of positives. It's just that they are a work in progress.
Lastly, I've just seen the name Mr. Kwabena Apia, once of Wellington Phoenix fame.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beauties of the A-League is just the names that you come across, names that come and go through the A-League. I just went onto his Wikipedia and he was born in New Zealand, wildcard. Born in Auckland, then moved to Australia. I wonder if that's... there might be a possibility for him to... do you know anything about him being available for New Zealand selection?
I think he is. I think more than anything, though, he's available for a couple of countries' selection, but he's not going to get picked for any of them because he's not that good. To put it bluntly, I mean, to be fair to him, he went and got a contract in Japan, I think, for a little while there after leaving the
United.
Phoenix. Yeah, which is, I think... I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's second division Japan, which is the level that Ryan De Vries plays at over there as well. Who's another player of who has played for the All Whites. Doesn't seem to be
South Korean, by the way.
Oh, South Korea was it? Okay, so
yes.
Probably still a similar level, but yeah, he is eligible for New Zealand. I would put a lot of money on the fact he would never ever play for New Zealand because they were just much better players. He's quick. He's effective in that way. Doesn't score a lot of goals. Doesn't create a lot. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, because his A-League, his professional career looks like this: Western Sydney, 25 games in 3 years. Wellington Phoenix, 16 games in about a year and a bit. Mariners, Central Coast Mariners, 38 games in 2 years. Newcastle Jets, he was there earlier this season, and now he's with Western United. So he's definitely a perennial A-League battler and born in New Zealand. So I just wanted to make that clear for anyone curious.
A lot of good players above battler status as well, bouncing around the A-League from New Zealand. Max Crocombe I saw started for Brisbane Roar on the weekend, so he seems to have won that starting gig, which I'm very glad for him because he was sitting on the bench all of last season for Salford United in the Salford FC, I can't remember, for Salford. And in the league below League 2, like the top division of the National League Conference, non-league, whatever they call it in England, he'd been there for a little while, and good to see him playing football. And he's a guy who probably, because I mean, if he's playing regularly in the A-League now, he is the third choice keeper for the All Whites if they were to name a squad tomorrow, which they actually are naming a squad soon because they got a game in November, believe it or not. The Newcastle Jets, I think, had the bye this week because there's a bye now because there's this extra team. There's an 11th team. So Matt Redenton wouldn't have played, but he's at the Jets. Who else have you got there? You got Gianni Stensness, played 90 minutes for the Central Coast Mariners. I think he played 90 minutes. I watched most of that game, but turned it off after the Mariners conceded a late penalty under disastrous VAR circumstances. But Stensness played quite well there. He picked up a yellow card for a cynical foul in midfield, which is like all good Kiwi midfielders in the A-League do. Alex Rufer is an absolute... I think Alex Rufer had about 11 yellow cards last season. It's almost one every second game. Costa Barbarouses as well, obviously. Got the big money move from Melbourne Victory to Sydney FC. Storm Roo, I think, started for Melbourne Victory. I didn't see a lot of that game because there was something else on at the same time. I forget what. But yeah, lots of Kiwis around the A-League. Not just at the Phoenix, who had a couple notable Kiwi performances as well. McCowatt, Cacace, Payne off the bench, Rufer, Fenton, Marinovic, fair few guys in the options there as well.
Old mate Gianni Stensness playing central midfield. Nice
I always thought while he was at the Phoenix last year, I watched him a couple times before he ever played, like in premiership games, before he ever played for the top team. I always thought he looked like a player who would be better at centre-back. He's got a bit of height, he's relatively good in the challenge. He's composed on the ball, but he didn't look particularly dynamic on the ball or anything like that. But he's started midfield all through the under 23s, the Olympic qualifying campaign recently. Obviously, started alongside Joe Bell at the under 20 World Cup. Played midfield for the Phoenix, playing midfield now for Central Coast. So I guess maybe I just got to put that centre back idea back in the tank where I found it or whatever.
I would really, really love to just be a 10-year A-League player.
I wonder if they get pensions.
They'll just be so
there's
fun.
Pensions for NBA players if you play 10 years. I don't know if
it's just more an example. I'd just rather play long term in the A-League. Like, yeah, you can dabble in a bit of overseas contracts, but just take it easy. Just play your whole career in the A-League. Do what you love to do. Play a bit of football. No stress. Have a bit of fun. Have a bit of fun with your lads in Australia, in Aotearoa, and do the rounds, do the circuit. Because Dylan Fox is playing centre-back for that same team as old Stensness, so he used to play for Phoenix.
Yeah, he was the one who gave away the handball penalty that cost them the game, although it was absolutely nothing to do with his fault. He was pulling his arm away, but let's not get into that.
Let's not wildcard. We will be back tomorrow with the full Plunkett Shield preview. We're going to go through most of the... we might go through all of the teams, but most of them, and just preview the Plunkett Shield, talk through that. So Plunkett Shield starting next week, so there's going to be plenty of Plunkett Shield. You know how the niche case does it. We just love the Plunkett Shield, and we're here to broadcast it. So shout out to us, shout out to the Plunkett Shield. There'll be another Patreon episode, so if you do enjoy what the niche case is doing, jump on Patreon, support us as much as best as however you want. And we do drop regular podcasts just for our Patreon audience, and who knows, something else might pop up as well that we need to podcast about later in the week. Other than that, we'll wrap it up. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, and just enjoy each other's company. Just get out there and have fun, smile, laugh. Kia kaha, stay beautiful.